Hey everyone, and welcome to the Retro channel, and today we're taking a quick look at a little update to the RF replacements for the Commodore 64 and 128. These are version 1.1 of the RFOFF, and the only real difference between these and the original versions is this little inclusion of this external Luma input and these little jumpers here. And the reason for this is to simplify the Luma bypass method, whereby you take the Luma trace, which is originally running across the main board and potentially picking up interference along the way, cut that off and replace it with a bit of shielded coax, which is just like this piece that I have here. And if you ordered one of the original versions, you would have found something like this included with the package. This worked as intended, but I know a lot of people are hesitant about cutting traces, and it wasn't the easiest procedure to perform. So what I've done instead is gone back to the drawing board and come up with a far easier way, which involves these boards here. These are the VIC-2 and VIC-2E Luma bypass boards, and what we have here is the same style of coax, but instead of needing to cut any traces, we just need to connect this end, and that is our Luma bypass done. No need to cut any traces or do any fiddly soldering. So what we have here is a small board that is designed to sit under the VIC-2 and prevents the Luma signal from going back into the main board and picking up interference. You can still use the RF replacements without these things, so it is kind of optional, in which case you just need to close that jumper and then the Luma signal is expected to come through the main board. But there is a good reason to use this, as we'll see in some of these comparison screenshots that I've got coming up soon. It does make a pretty decent difference when using S-Video, both on the Commodore 64 longboard and the Commodore 128. Not so much of a big difference with the Commodore 64 shortboards, and pretty much the reason for that is because Commodore laid out the board a little bit differently and actually added some guard traces around the Luma signal on those main boards. So not much of a difference with the shortboards, but definitely on the longboards and the 128, you should see a pretty decent improvement. Now, it did take me a few revisions to get this just right. Ideally, I wanted something as slimline as possible so that it doesn't add too much height to the VIC-2 and also doesn't get in the way of things like the VIC-2 Quarry, which it doesn't. My original idea was a board like this, which has basically a socket on top and then pin headers underneath, and they're sort of offset so we can break out those signals. But as you can see with a side-by-side comparison, these raise the VIC-2 quite a bit, and they also just don't look that pretty. So this is what we have now, and yes, I will fix up the silk screen with the next batch, but once you have the VIC-2 on top of this thing, you can't see that issue anyway. So I'm not going to go over how to install the RF replacement. I've already shown that in the previous video, so you can still check out that video if you want to, but you can pretty much ignore the whole Luma bypass section of that video. It was very long and complicated, and this just makes it so much easier. So let's see how to install one of these things, and then we'll have a look at the results that you can expect. And if you do happen to have one of the original RF replacements, yeah, sorry, there's no easy way to do the Luma bypass with these boards. You'll still have to rely on the previous method. And from now on, all boards will be version 1.1, regardless if you opt for the optional Luma bypass or not. You can still always add this later on in the future. So we'll use the old Ziff socketed bread bin for this one. Just move this out of the way, and as you can see, I've already got one of these installed, so let's just pop that out for a second and start afresh. So normally you just have your VIC-2 installed in its regular socket, and you can still use these RF replacements without the optional bypass board. You just need to close this jumper here, which will allow the Luma signal to come across the main board from the VIC-2. But like I said, that is going to pick up some interference. So if we pop out the VIC-2, stick this Luma bypass board in its place, making sure we get the sockets aligned correctly, and of course the VIC-2 aligned with the notch on the socket. Stick that in there, and then stick that on our RF replacement, making sure this jumper is open, and that is the Luma bypass done. No need to cut any traces or do any complicated soldering. So let's see what the results are like with the Luma bypass versus no Luma bypass. So let's start off with worst case scenario. This is the stock RF modulator with a long board running over S video. So yeah, quite noisy and not very sharp text. If we move over to the RF replacement without the Luma bypass, you can see things are looking a lot better, but areas like this purple section up here still have these tiny vertical stripes, and the light blue section also has checkerboarding in it. And finally, with the Luma bypass, you can see pretty much all that noise in the colored section is gone and everything looks nice and clean. So there's no Luma bypass versus Luma bypass. So that's really why I recommend the Luma bypass, especially for the long boards when you're using S-Video. As for composite, we'll skip over the original RF modulator because we know that's going to look terrible. Let's have a look at what it looks like with no Luma bypass. So composite, it looks softer around the text. We also get some, random noise around some of these transition areas. That is just the limitations of composite video. So that's how it looks without the Luma bypass. And with the Luma bypass, yeah, it honestly doesn't look that much different. Maybe it's a slight improvement, but if we swap back again, yeah, there's not much difference between no Luma bypass and with Luma bypass. So that's why I sort of really recommend it for people using S-Video. If you're using composite, well, God help you. Let's jump over to the shortboard, and this is the stock RF modulator from the 64 shortboard. Here's our RF replacement, looking a whole lot better, but yeah, no Luma bypass on this one. And with the Luma bypass, it doesn't really look all that different. Like I said, this I think is just because the shortboards actually have some guard traces around the Luma signal on the main board that pretty much protects it from most interference. In saying that, I think the VIC-2 that is used in the shortboards is actually worse than the VIC-2 used in the long boards. So again, if we look at the shortboard without the Luma bypass, and with the Luma bypass, there isn't really that much difference, and you may actually still be able to spot some jail bars in this purple area. Compare that to the same setup with the longboards, and yeah, you can really see the difference between the longboard VIC-2 and the shortboard VIC-2, and that's not just in the color saturation, that is pretty much across the board. And just to confirm this, I actually did a little experiment where I took the VIC-2 from a shortboard and stuck it in a longboard. And if you're planning on doing such a thing, make sure you don't connect the 12 volts from the VIC-2 socket on the longboard to the shortboard VIC-2s, because they do not run on 12 volts, only 5 volts. So you can't just go swapping VIC-2s between shortboards and longboards, at least not without some modifications. And the results I got looked pretty much the same as having the shortboard VIC-2 in a shortboard. So yeah, I definitely think it's the VIC-2 that really makes the difference here. And personally, I think the longboard VIC-2s, the older ones, actually look better. Again, when it comes to composite video, there's no real difference here. So this is composite on the shortboard without the bypass, and composite on the shortboard with the bypass. Yeah, no real huge difference. Jumping over to the 128, and this is what the stock RF modulator looks like with S-Video. Yeah, terrible as expected. Here's the RF replacement with S-Video, but no Luma bypass. Certainly looking a whole lot better, but we can still see those jail bars in there. And yes, believe it or not, this is the same machine just with the Luma bypass. So you can see jail bars are pretty much invisible. We can also do the same thing with the Easy Flash 3 menu. So this is without the Luma bypass on the 128, and this is with the Luma bypass. And just for completeness, here is composite video just with the RF replacement and no Luma bypass. So you can actually still make out those jail bars even with composite video. Which means with our Luma bypass, yeah, those jail bars once again are pretty much gone. So still worthwhile on the 128 even with composite. Now those tests were all done with the 128 DCR, so the metal case D. Let's have a look at the original 128. So original 128 on S-Video with the RF replacement, but no Luma bypass, and yeah, there are definitely some jail bars still hidden in there. And 128 with the Luma bypass. So if you look closely, you can still make out some of the jail bars, but they're definitely heavily reduced compared to without the Luma bypass. And as you can imagine, it's a similar story with the Easy Flash 3 menu and also with composite video. So I think we've stared at enough screenshots. I think you get the basic idea. So that is just a quick update for version 1.1 of the RF replacements. These should be available on the Tindy store by the time you're watching this video, along with the optional Luma bypass boards. So links to all that stuff are in the video description. And yeah, that is it. Like I said, just a quick video this time, just a little update on these things. So thank you all for watching. A huge thanks to the people that support the channel on Patreon. They get ad-free early access to all videos, along with discounts on the Tindy store. So if you're interested in becoming a patron and also helping out this channel and helping it grow, please consider signing up using the links in the video description. Yeah, that's it from me. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.